Okay, well, I know it's middle of the day and I want to be considerate of everyone's time. So I'm sure there'll be more people jumping in. I'm Jason here from Minga, and thank you all for joining. So today I'm going to keep it pretty, since the only people invited to this are all Minga users already. So I'm obviously not going to do any marketing stuff. We're going to stay pretty tactical. Talking about tardy management, some best practices, and then some of the big updates that we have just released in Minga around how this framework all works. I'll throw some shout outs to a handful of people. I know I'm going to miss people, so I won't name anyone by names, but you know who you are. There's some schools and folks on here that have also, I believe, let me just double check. Oh, and we are recording. Thanks. That was from Georgia. Yes, Georgia, I'm recording this. So shout out to a few. There's folks on this call that have been part of this conversation and process for like the last 6 to 9 months, as we've been talking about like tardy management frameworks and policies and programming, and then how that can fit into Minga and what we can do to help. So I see faces and you know who you are that have been part of that. So thank you guys very much. And I'm excited to start to show where, how we've made some progress in this. So once again, I'm Jason from Minga, for those of you who don't know me. And we're going to talk about managing and reducing tardies. If you're on this call, I'm assuming it's probably something that's high on your list. Most of the high schools and middle schools that we talk to, this comes up quite a bit. So first off, we're going to start a little bit just with some high-level overview on tardy policy and tardy framework, because that's a very important underpinning of like implementing this in any system is the program itself. And we kind of come back to the 3 C's of like a tardy policy. Obviously, this extends into a much bigger part on just behavior policies or even all policies, including like our hallway management and check-in processes and everything else. But 3 really important parts to start out here are, first off, in building this program, it is so important that we start with clarity. And that means clearly defining expectations about what, being in time, being on time means, what constitutes a tardy, and the consequence framework and how it all works. Clear usually translates into simple. And so it's got to be, something that's clear, something that's simple, and something that's manageable by everyone on campus. That can also then, of course, be clearly communicated to everyone. And that's very important too. And obviously, Minga can play part of that in how this gets communicated on campus.
Hello?
Staff.
Yeah.
But, that also must be clearly and effectively communicated to staff and students, across campus. And then, of course, this is a big part of the overall program, and that's consistency. Whatever we do from a clear, that's clearly defined and then effectively communicated must be done consistently across campus. That means that our tardy policy can't be different, similar to hallways, right? It can't be different per classroom. It can't be different per teacher. It, of course, definitely can't be different per student. It needs to be equitable. It needs to have compliance and buy-in on whatever that program is, and all of our teachers and staff need to be kind of running the program consistently across campus as well. Okay. So I kind of just gave a little bit of a guideline and a framework on how that would look and what that would look like on campus. Starting, this would be Minga High School, and starting with like a clear definition of what our expectations are, because we want this to drive back to student and staff accountability. So that means we need to set expectations. So our expectation that, staff and students arrive to class on time. And then what defines a tardy? Very clearly defined consistently across campus. Tardy is an arrival at class after the bell rings, either first period or any period. So that has not, of course, been excused by an admin teacher or staff. So, clearly define what is a tardy. And then if there is a tardy, clearly define the process that happens. In this case, we're going to talk about centralizing tardy check-in because for consistency purposes across campus and for buy-in in the classroom, you know, a lot of the research and the documentation, the best practices, if you kind of just dig through piles and piles of this on the internet and what everyone makes available, is to centralize tardy tracking and tardy check-in. So in this workflow, in this case, in this example, when we check it, or when if you're tardy, then you must centrally check into a tardy station or with a hallway monitor to receive a tardy pass that will let you into class, which means that, you know, basically it's a closed door policy. Once the bell rings, we'll centrally check in with somewhere. Technically, you could do the tardy tracking in the classroom as well, probably similar to how a lot of you are doing it today with how attendance is being taken. The problem or the challenge of doing that is coming back to consistency, is getting teachers to do that consistently from class to class. So the, you know, statistics and human nature would say that, you know, if you have more than one teacher in your high school at any given moment, then that is impossible. So in order to do that, you must, you know, do it centrally. Although the processes in Minga could still work if you did it in the classroom. You know, that would be, yeah, once again, bell rings, doors close, and now students would check into a tardy station or with a hallway monitor or a tardy monitor. And it would get, the tardy would get tracked at that point and recorded, as well as they would get a tardy pass to check into class that would allow them into class. And then, you know, through all that stuff is then, you know, now we've clearly defined our expectations. We've defined what a tardy is. I talk to a lot of schools and they'll be like, well, you know, we usually take attendance after the first 15 minutes of class. And that, you know, anything prior to that is not a tardy. You know, that is obviously from a definition perspective, it's probably fairly loosely defined or loosely enforced, but it also basically means that, you know, you can show up to class 15 minutes late and it's fine. So there's an expectation issue and an accountability issue. So, you know, we want to clearly define these with what we want on campus culturally and functionally. And then if you do get a tardy, it's important to clearly define what your consequence framework is. Most best practices would take this back to a progressive consequence framework. There's a lot of variability in what that progressive consequence framework is. If it's obviously super strict or maybe one would argue too strict, then it's probably hard to enforce. So it needs to be realistic, but also very clearly defined. So this is just an example, and we are just about to push out some guides that will have, you know, best practices based on a lot of research and stuff like that on what some good progressive consequence frameworks are. But it's mostly first and foremost, most important to clearly define it and then to execute on it. And then, of course, once we have this whole thing, is we need to communicate it effectively, consistently, and frequently with our staff and students so that we are continuing to reinforce this. And obviously, you know, in Minga, there's easy ways to do that. Just create, these are just examples that I pulled off the internet. And, you know, just create some of this content and post it regularly to Minga. Make sure that it is reinforced with our staff and students. Set expectations. You know, define good expectations with what we want, and also reset and redefine why it's important for students and staff to be on time. Like, what does that mean about respect, and what does that mean, and how does that kind of connect and integrate with the other kind of cultural elements of campus? Because I think right now a lot of it is we're missing clarity around these expectations again. So so put it out there, create some good content. These are just examples, and you know, very easy to post, very easy to share in school. And once again, all this type of content would also very easily share through the community module on Minga with like posts or full graphics and stuff like that as well. So super high level, a couple of tips, things that we consistently find across the board from schools that are making progress and being successful in working with tardies are, go to a closed door policy at class. So when the bell rings, make it very clear. Teachers, for the 60 to 1 to 2 minutes prior to the bell ringing, go to the door and welcome students in as they come to class on time. That is actually a extremely powerful positive reinforcement for showing up on time. Everybody loves to be welcomed. Everybody loves to be an individual. And so that is a really important part of it. And then when the bell rings, close the door. Close the door and teachers take attendance and begin instruction time at the beginning of class. If nobody's making it to class on time, maybe you have a passing period problem, maybe your campus is just too big, and maybe look at that as part of the discussion. But, basically this helps really clearly define and reinforce what a tardy is, as well as bringing in some positive reinforcement component to students when they come in on time. So yeah, quick tip, closed door policy. Secondly, then centralized tardy check-in. Obviously, you could have a huge campus, so that we don't want to send students on a 20-minute walk across campus to one location. So depending on your campus size, this could be done centrally in one location, say at the front office with a stationary barcode scanner. It could be done mobily with hallway monitors that are in the hallways, at the end of passing period as well. But just make it very clear and understand what that check-in is. Clearly define how they do it. Students would come up and basically just scan their ID. It could be their digital ID from Minga. It could be their printed ID, whatever ID, it doesn't really matter. But they're going to scan that and check in as a tardy. And that will then track their tardy centrally. So we have very clear and consistent recording of how tardies are recorded on campus, and it will also issue them a pass that confirms that they have checked in so that they can get into class. And then the only thing the teacher needs to do is verify that pass as they come into class. No more, nothing else needs to be done by the teacher. So it's also very efficient for the teacher in the classroom workflow. And then third tip to get started is automating how this all works together. I can't tell you how many times we've seen just I call it death by Google Sheets. They just have piles and piles and piles of Google Sheets that have tardies for the last week, and some poor person in the front office is going through and trying to tally them and then create a new Google Sheets with the consequences and then another, sheet and process for how the notifications are done. And then they have to come back to it to do follow-up. Obviously, you could throw people power at this for a long time, but it's probably not going to be sustainable and likely also not consistent. So it's going to come back to our consistency issues as well. So, find ways to automate this. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking about it if we didn't have some great ways to do it, but there's platforms and tools. You could even become a whiz at Google Sheets and start to do automations. But automation, I think, is extremely important to making this consistent and sustainable long term. So before I jump into doing this with Minga, does anyone have any comments or I'd be super open to people just throwing down some comments or questions on the overall high-level process components. I know some of you do this already. Lots of you have experience. I would love for if someone wants. There's only 40 people on the call, so no stage fright necessary. If anyone wants to jump in and just share a little bit of feedback or comments around the overall high-level kind of process and framework, and you can just unmute yourself and chime in. Or you can raise a hand. Or I'm going to call on people if nobody talks.
Hi, I'll share something. I'm Megan Ratliff from Vista High in Vista near San Diego. And we've been focusing on this lately. One thing that I think is funny to share is we've been playing music over the loudspeakers for the 1 minute before the bell rings. And the students are starting to get a natural response to knowing when the music is on. So we do the closed door policy, but we paired it with music playing, and it's sort of a lighthearted way to encourage them to get to class. So that's been fun.
Awesome. And Megan, how has the closed door policy been received?
Been received well. I will say that at first it was a mountain. It was a mountain of lunch detentions, but after a while of doing it, they got used to it and it decreased significantly.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Go ahead if anyone else wants to jump in. That was awesome. Well, gonna have to call on people. JT, I saw you in there. I know you got lots of thoughts and feedback on this.
Yeah, we have, I mean, our policy is based around, similar to what everybody else you see on the screen here. But to be honest, we haven't done a great job since we come to Minga re-automating some of this process. So we're excited to hear about what you have. Right now, we still throw manpower at it for the most part.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. If anyone else wants to share, please don't hesitate to jump in, and I'll keep it pretty open and loose. So
I want to share. I know that I haven't been to the previous ones. We've been doing this, and we have found that we use it in combination with Sika. And so as every third tardy a student gets, they're assigned a learning lab after school, and the teacher sends home a Sika automated message to parents, and it's connected to our non-privileged list. And so then if they go to a learning lab for 1 hour after school, it can replace 3 of their tardies, and we can actually recode it in Aries so they can remove themselves from the non-privileged list. So we have prom coming. So we have a huge amount of kids that don't want to have those tardies. And compared to last year, we didn't have Minga last year. We didn't have all this in place. In comparison to last year, it's significantly reduced tardies. Students are checking their amount of tardies. They want to know what's going on. You know, they wanted to get a sporting event. So when we connected to our non-privileged list, it really gave it that last push to get kids on track. So not perfect. We still have a lot of tardies, and there's some kids that don't care, but for the masses, it helped. And it helped the teachers a lot, because all they have to do is use Sika to send a message home, fill out a Google form that goes to one of our assistants, and she assigns the learning labs after school. So that was helpful. I have a question for the lady that said they use music on the speaker. For 1 minute, do you do that before every class or just in the morning, first period?
Hi, Jenna. Thank you for that comment about what you're doing. I learned a lot from that. We just do it randomly every once in a while. We do it probably 3 to 4 times a week before a random class period. So it's not every single time, or our ears would bleed.
I was going to say, every period you do that? That's awesome. Okay, got it.
Nope.
Thank you.
oh, there you go. Michael Allen just chimed in there too on chat and said that they do music before every class. So I love that idea. I mean, the welcoming at the doorway too, like I've read some incredible research papers on that, just from the psychological power of welcoming a student into class on time, and just how much of a positive reinforcement that is too. And then, mix in some hip hop, and I think, that's a perfect combo. So I love the music idea. And Jenna, thanks for sharing that on the Sika side too. I mean, that's, there are other ways to do this in Minga. I mean, Minga is the best way, obviously, but it's also a new way. So there's lots of ways to do this, and I'm going to show you a little bit on what we've been working on and how to do it here. So, so quick introduction.
Do we have time for one quick question?
Yeah, please.
Hey, those who have done the closed doors, was it worse before it got better? In other words, one of the keys that our teachers love about Minga is the non-interruption to write passes. And so if we close doors and then we allow people in with the tardy stuff, the doors are still closed. That means the doors are being knocked on and etc. I mean, is it one of those things where it's really bad at the beginning and then it gets better? Or how'd you sell that, maybe? Just real quick.
I guess I'll chime in, because we have been doing that. We don't do a locked door. We just do a closed door. So we did do lockouts before, and the lockouts were pretty disruptive. And that wasn't that popular with teachers, but just closing it and trying to let them know to please check for a pass when they come in. We don't have 100% compliance from all teachers, that's for sure. But but it's been, and it also was worse before it was better. So kind
Okay.
of sand.
Yeah, it's just running through my head here how that would go, so. Thank you.
Great question. All right, so we recently released a fairly significant update that you probably wouldn't necessarily see unless you went looking for it, but the PBIS module has been renamed to the behavior module. And then we added a lot of functionality into the behavior module. We did push it out fairly aggressively, so expect to see some changes over the next couple updates as we refine some of the components and collect more feedback from schools that are using it. But basically, there's, if and I'm going to go into them in detail, we're going to look at it a little bit, but there's been big updates in how you can set up and record behaviors and the functionality available when you do record behaviors. We've also added the ability to create and assign consequences. So you can also set up all your consequences in there, from warnings to notifications to referrals to detentions and everything else in between. And then a big part of tying this all together is we have also introduced automations into the behavior module. So that gives you the ability to automate the assignment of, say, consequences based on the recording of and the monitoring of behaviors. So that'll make sense in a second if it doesn't make sense now, but think of it in simplicity, say like after their third tardy, automatically issue them a warning. After their fifth tardy, automatically issue them a lunch detention. And then automatically, leading into the next parts, and then also automate notifications to parents and administrators, depending on how you want to do that. So we have now introduced the ability to do parent notifications by both email and SMS, and they can be completely automated into both either behaviors or consequence assignment. And then lastly, of course, be able to report on all of it, and then track things like the serving of those consequences or completion of those consequences and stuff like that as well as notifications back and forth through the system. So lots of changes, a lot of updates. The automation stuff, is obviously a huge change too into the behavior component. And let's dive into it. So real quick, for the workflows that I'm going to show today, we're going to implement those best practices we start with. So, bell rings. Well, before the bell rings, we play music because I love that. So we turn on music. Teachers come to the door to greet students in for the 1 to 2 minutes prior to the bell. The bell rings, doors are closed. And then with Minga's check-in module, we set up a tardy check-in. And you'll see a lot of new stuff this is under here in the behavior manager, under behaviors. This is where we create our behaviors, or sorry, this is check-in. Under here where we create check-in on our reasons. So we are going to create a check-in reason. That's our tardy check-in. You can give it a color and an icon. We are restricting that or doing that for students and student leaders. And then here's a couple of important additions into the check-in component. Is we are going to automatically track a tardy behavior when they check in, and we are going to automatically issue a tardy hall pass when they check in. So you're going to create that reason, and then the process is once the bell rings, your hallway monitors or at that check-in station, they simply pop into teacher tools, click check-in, check-out, select their reason. And then if they're on a mobile device, they can turn on their camera. If they have a barcode scanner set up and it's like a stationary scanner in the office, they can turn on the scanner. And they're just going to, when a student's late, they have to check in with them. The student would open their ID on their phone or could use a printed ID, either will work. and they simply check in. Let's see if I can make this. It's always tricky if I can make this happen off my camera on my computer, but we'll try that. So I've got Rod Flanders comes up here. He's been late to class and he's going to check in. Yeah, these cameras don't work very good. There we go. So Rod was just checked in. We could keep checking in. So obviously that's a continuous process if you're using a barcode scanner or a device. And if we go to Rod's ID, on his ID, he will have that tardy pass right on his device. So paperless, primary paperless system here. So that pass is going to show up on Rod's right on top of his ID. It says where he was checked in by, who he was checked in by. And he, at this point, has 5 minutes basically to get to class. You could shorten that time if you wanted to, but obviously we want to continue that accountability process by defining that he's to go to class right after he's been checked in. And then this is what he would, right to that point, I think that was Jenna that said that, thank you, that, we're not locking the doors, but the door's closed. And so Rod can kind of quietly come in and all the teacher has to do in that workflow is confirm that he does have that tardy pass. So that's step number one. On the back side of that, under our behavior manager, you'll see in the behavior manager now there's a new behavior dashboard and we can see all the tardies that have been, this is daily, so we can see all the tardies that have been tracked today. So if I clicked on that, I can actually see, well, let's go to the behavior history. I can see there that, all the tardies that have been tracked today, including the timestamps. So there's Rod Flanders, that one that I just checked in, showing the tardy that he was tracked. And that's going to all show up on our dashboard for today on, in real time, basically what's going on. So take a note here. And so that now we have, very efficiently tracked the tardies, centralized the tardy tracking through check-in. So it's all, all scalable. It's paperless for the most part in the event that a student does not have a phone and they check in. There's two backup options. Backup option number one would be you could in those situations, you could have a pad for a handwritten pass when needed. We know most students have phones on campus, so especially at the high school level, so that's unlikely to be too much of an issue. But in addition to that, when the student does check in, the teacher can also check on the hall pass dashboard to see if that student does have a tardy pass as well. So that could be confirmed by the teacher on the hall pass dashboard from the teacher's device, but that's obviously a little more interruptive to class for the teacher if they have to go back and check the device. So the handwritten, is a work as long as it's obviously not too many. Students are likely checking in with their digital ID anyways, which means that they're, we're going paperless for the majority of this. So that's taken us through step number one. If we come back to our, the processes here. So now we've centralized our tardy check-in. We went to a closed door policy. And now we get into kind of the groovy stuff, how this all gets automated right inside of Minga. So if I click on my behaviors, this is where we create the behaviors that we're tracking on campus. You'll see two new areas. Here we could set up all of our consequences. So under create now, we have options for behaviors, consequences, and automations. So we predefine all of our consequences. And when you do that, another interesting, or another component for automating this is, let's say our first option is or the first consequence in our progressive framework would be a warning. You can put in a description. You can add notes to that warning because they can be assigned manually as well. But you'll also see here for consequences that we can also automate the parent notifications as well as an administrative notification if needed. So if we want, mom or dad or a guardian to get a text message notifying them that their student has received a tardy warning, then that is going to be done completely automated here. So we're going to set up our consequences within our consequence framework. And then we're going to get into threshold-based automations that will automatically assign those consequences and monitor and record those consequences to students based on the thresholds we define. So in this case, I've set it up pretty easy. I have a 3 tardy threshold, a 5 tardy threshold, and an 8th tardy threshold. Chelsea, I see your question. Where do I find consequences? If you're in behaviors, if you click create up here, do you have the option to see all of them? Chelsea's just asking where she finds consequences.
Sorry, looking for the unmute. I only have behavior as an option.
For create?
Yes.
Step number 1, under settings, you probably have to enable consequences on your behavior settings.
It's checked currently.
Oh. Well, we'll dive into that in a second. You might try if you just turned it on, try a shift refresh because it might be cached as well.
Okay, thank you.
So in our 3 tardy threshold here, as I've set it up, I gave it a name and a description. We're going to send a warning after a 3rd tardy. And this note is going to automatically get included in the notification to the student that says on their 3rd tardy, they've given a warning. And it also warns them or prompts them to what the next consequence would be. And then we can select the consequence that we automatically want to assign. In this case, it's a tardy warning. And this drop-down box will be available from the consequences you've created. You can automatically assign a complete by. So let's say it's obviously in a warning, there's nothing to complete, so it's not needed. But if it was a lunch detention, then you could say, this is to be completed in 2 days. And then it will automatically track statuses of those consequences. And then you set your behavior threshold. So this is going to happen after 3 tardies. So I define the number, and then I can define the behaviors that I want to count towards it. And that does mean we could have multiple behaviors that are being tracked here. So it could be, consequences around vaping or hallway behavior, or in this case, consequences around tardies. And you save that, and that's going to automatically start running. So Rod already had one. I think he was my last person. And you can see that today on the dashboard, 1 tardy consequence, one tardy warning consequence has already been issued today. But if I continue to, and I'm just going to give Rod a couple more behaviors here. Check him in a couple more times. So I'm just simulating that he's been scanned in a few more times and had tardies tracked. You can see that my consequence dashboard just updated to show that we've had 2 tardy warnings issued. And so Rod just got another tardy warning.
Hey, Jason, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
How are those warnings delivered? Is that a notification, or do you do emails, or what? How does it work?
Oh, great question. So it's all done. The notifications are delivered in Minga. So we don't have the permissions to email students, generally speaking, just because we don't get access to the emails. So yeah, it's all done in Minga, and I'll give an example here. Let's see, I'll stop share. And we'll do BART really quick because I have BARTs. I have BART on my screen here. So there's BART. And if I push him to BART real quick. I think I already did. I bet you's already got one. Oh, there you go. He had a consequence notification already pop up on his screen. So if they have the app on their phone, this will be a push notification that will get pushed to them. And if they have it open on a browser on their Chromebook or anything else like that, if they've ever logged in to Minga and authenticated, then it will also be a browser-based push notification that will get sent to their device as well. And then the students, this part has not been released. It'll be pushed out in probably the next 7 to 10 days. Similar to how we have a teacher tools component in Minga. For teachers, there will be a new student tools component that will pop up from that as well. And that will actually have a part that will show them all their behavior history. It'll show them their hall pass history, behavior history, and the status of any consequences that they've been issued. So that there'll be a spot for them to be able to see that as well, right on their teacher or student tools. So we now, and of course, when we do those behaviors and the consequences, once again, there could also have been notifications sent home. So I will now just quickly, if we continue to issue tardies, then the next step that would come up would be a consequence. Let's say a lunch detention. So Rod continued to be late. And now he's had a lunch detention automatically assigned to him through the framework as well. And right in Minga, it also gives you the option under your behavior manager in reports. We can also look at our consequence history. So we can see all of our consequences laid out as well as statuses for those consequences. And in these cases, so for example, there's the lunch detention that I just served with BART. It also, when BART comes in and he does serve that lunch detention, then the lunch detention monitor or who's ever working there can also come into Minga and mark that as complete. And so we'll be tracked there, as we can see, there looks like these should be marked as completed. So there's clearly a couple of updates that we're still doing here. So we're working through the system, but we will be, you'll be able to monitor and track that completely through Minga as well. And this will, when these get marked as complete, if they were issued by a teacher, it will also push a notification back to the teacher for follow-up that consequence has been completed as well. So it does close the loop on those notifications back with staff. So we continue driving on the accountability component that's been done as well. And you can also integrate notifications into that as well back to parents and or admin on the status changes of consequences. So that, I think that kind of covers the bulk of it. Maybe just to make use of time, because I know we have a few minutes, I'll open it up to Q&A. So please go ahead and just, you can unmute and throw them in or throw them up on chat. Either way works, but very open to thoughts, feedback, and what do you guys think?
I have a question around the notification to parents. Is there a parent end of Minga? Or how does that, where's the connection there? How does it make its way to parents?
Good question. So notifications right now to parents are going to be done. through email or SMS or text message.
And that is something that when the student sets up their account, they would add in the parent contact information?
So not when the student sets up their account. So that would come typically from when you set up the accounts for students, either, with a list, you could pull that information from your SIS, or other big changes to Minga recently are under the people manager, especially as you all look to hopefully renew this coming year, people manager. We have made huge improvements in our ability to do automated rostering with your student information system or rostering component, where we're able to pull primary parent email and phone number directly through rostering as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Stay tuned for updates on parent portal and parent notification systems later this year, but that'll be probably an early 2024 discussion, February, March 2024, for updates on some parent portal stuff.
Which module is this one in? Or is this stuff in?
All the stuff that we've covered today.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is out right now.
No, like right now we have digital ID and hall pass only. Where does this reside?
Oh, what modules?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no, great question. That's a very great question. Thanks for that. So at the end of the day, for everything I covered here, it is going to basically use the check-in module, the behavior module. Well, it's going to use all the modules at the end of the day. So it will end up being a bundle. So we do have, we have updated our product structure as well. So there is bundle options too. And this is going to kind of cross the platform across most of the pieces. And so if you have any questions on how that integrates with what you have set up today, just let us know, and we're happy to kind of go over and review that with you. And also, obviously, if you're already running Minga, we can also turn them on very easily for a trial, so you can check it out and use it on on campus and play with it. So that's super easy. It's all done soft. Paul says, is there an option on the way to integrate with software such as PowerSchool so that teachers could enter Tardies into PowerSchool, but Minga would have to be able to migrate that info? Oh, Paul, amazing question. So since we've centralized tardy monitoring or tardy tracking and taking it out of the classroom, the next big question is, how do we reconcile that attendance? If the teacher closes the door and then marks everyone as absent if they're not there, obviously we need to reconcile that attendance later to turn those A's into T's for that period. Step number one right now is that the data is all in Minga. So worst case scenario, this is very worst case, is that we would need someone to attendance record those tardies and then update them in the student information system. Now that's gross process and nobody's going to want to do that. But shockingly, it still happens a ton today. So, but worst case scenario, depending on your student information system, that may be the case. Better scenario is at the end of each day at whatever, or 1 or 2 times a day, depending on when your absentee, phone calls go out, your absent phone calls go out, because it needs to be done before that happens, obviously, is you're able to actually, and we've tried this with a handful of student information systems already, but you can take a behavior history report for Tardies for the day and export that list and import it into your student information system. So we've done this with Q, with PowerSchool, with Aries, a few more. So and have gone through this process, and that works. And it's it's easy to do. It still is a manual process, but it is easy to do. And depending on your student information system, it will take the timestamp on that tardy and convert it to update the attendance record in your student information system automatically from a list import. And then thirdly is we are going to be knocking off automating this via API with student information systems. It is a very complex process for us, but it's something we'll be working on through the year. So if you have questions about where your student information system might fall into that list and priority, please don't hesitate to reach out and talk to us about it. The other part of that, of course, is that you need to have your district agree to having an external system update attendance records automatically in the system, which is not a given. We have seen that very adamantly denied at least half the time by the district. Funny enough is they don't seem to have a problem doing it by a list, but the thought of having a system externally update it, crosses a line of what they're comfortable with. So that's probably a great place to check first. But Paul, really, really good question. Chelsea, I'm not sure on Synergy off the top of my head. So, but come back and check and we can go through it with you as well. So we are working through them, and we're doing it a lot in conjunction with, some of our schools to go through and define the process better. So I know that's the time that we had allocated today. So thank you all so much for joining and taking some time today. There'll be some more stuff coming. So lots of changes coming for the 23-24 school year, including the launch of our flex time module, our advisory period or flex period module, looking around probably the mid to late June timeframe. And we'll have lots of updates on that coming. And I will make this recording available to everyone that accepted for today's call. So if you have any questions, hopefully you know how to get a hold of us. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and thank you all so much for joining. Also, feedback, thoughts, if you didn't want to share it on the call, but you're like, how does this work? This doesn't work, this would work. We'd love all that feedback and stuff right now. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a wonderful Wednesday and wonderful afternoon.